All right. So you should have just finished your exploration activity. Now we're going to just sort of look at that in that reflection, and we're just going to sort of look at that reflection together just to make sure we're all on the same page at the end of it. So looking back at our tables, we're going to see if we notice anything. So our factored form, your your quadratic always had the pattern of y equals x minus a number times x minus another number in our quadratic. So that was our typical pattern for our factored form. Now, a pattern that you probably noticed with factored form is your x-intercepts. Your x-intercepts were always A0 and B0 for those quadratics. So when you were graphing factored form, our factor form easily told us what the x-intercepts and the y, or what the x-intercepts were for your function. You just had to look, okay, if I have, for example, if I had x minus 1, y plus 2, it would be, okay, if I'm minus 1, it would be 1, 0, and negative 2 would be negative 2, 0. It's always the opposite of what those numbers were that showed up in your problem. So x minus 1 would be 1, 0, and x plus 2 would be negative 2, 0. Those inverses of whatever showed up in your numbers, those were always your x-intercepts. So factor form, just by looking at the equation, we can easily determine what the x-intercepts are, which is great. Vertex form, this is one you should have been familiar with. You know your vertex form, y equals a quantity x minus h squared plus k. That's our familiar vertex form that we're familiar with. And I hope you picked up on this pattern because we talked about it already, that the vertex in vertex form is always your negative h k. It's always whatever the opposite number is that's in your h and then your k. And that was always our vertex. So just by looking at the equation, we can easily determine what the vertex is, and we can graph that. That was something we've talked about already throughout this week, so you should have picked up on that one. Last one was standard form. Now, standard form is written as y equals ax squared plus bx plus c is our traditional standard form. So there's always a number x squared plus another number x and plus some c. Now, with standard form might have been a little bit harder to pick up what the pattern was, but with standard form, the y-intercept is always 0, c. So whatever the c value, whatever the last number was in standard form, that was always our y-intercept. So these are the three patterns that we want to be looking for with our different types of quadratics. So if you have a vertex, or if you have a factored form, we're always going to be able to identify what the x-intercepts are really quickly. If you have a vertex form, you're always going to be able to identify the vertex easily. And if you have standard form, you should always be able to identify the y-intercept very quickly. So that's why each of them have their place, and each of them are important. Each of them have their place, and each of them are important with their specific purposes. Now, we don't necessarily want vertex form when we're looking for the x-intercepts, or we don't necessarily want factor form when we're looking for the y-intercept. They don't help us in that way. But each of them have their purpose with helping us find key features. Now, because each of them have a specific purpose, it's important for us to be able to switch from one form to another. It's important for me to be able to change from factored form to standard form, or standard form to vertex form, or vertex form to factored form. Oop, I'm running low. We're cutting it off quick. So that's what we're going to talk about in the future, is how can we switch from these forms quickly without having to do a lot of work, so I can figure out what these key features are without having to struggle with like having to graph the entire thing of factor form. I can just switch it to standard form easily and then be able to know what my x-intercept or my y-intercept is, depending on what graph I have. So that's where we're going to stop it for today. Hopefully this is a quick little review for you. From here, you should have some practice to finish out your period. Let me know if you have any questions.